Hi, I'm Jace, and Merry Christmas. We're going to be doing a speed build of Ebenezer Scrooge's house from A Christmas Carol. It was written by Charles Dickens and was published in 1843. It's also set in London. So based on that information, I'm going to assume that the story itself is set around 1840s London. I don't think the novella itself gives an exact year. I'm just going to assume it's sometime in the 1840s, maybe the exact year it was published, maybe a few years before, maybe a year or so in the future. I don't know. 1840s London. I chose to build his home in Brightchester because I felt like that was the best spot. Hinford-on-Bagley was a little too remote. It was set in London. He did live in the city. So I chose Brightchester. A misconception about Scrooge is that he was selfish and spending all of his money on himself instead of being generous on Christmas. No. He was a miser. He did not even want to spend his money on himself. The place that he lived in was actually a rented room. And it wasn't even originally his rented room. It belonged to his business partner and friend, Jacob Marley, who died 7 years before the story started. So he's been living in his dead friend's apartment for 7 years, and it was pretty cheap. The novella points out that he was living pretty cheaply in this apartment. So I wanted the house, and especially Scrooge's portion of the house, to look not all that fancy. Obviously, The Sims 4 has its limitations, but I was going for pretty basic for the Victorian era London. That I didn't want to make it look as though a really super rich person lived here. For the actual speed build itself, I did some imagining in my brain that this house was shared between Scrooge and the actual owner of the house. And in my mind, I was imagining that the actual owner of the house does not consider this home, their apartment in this home, their primary residence. They just stay here when they're in London doing work. And they probably have some really fancy family manor in the countryside that they consider their main home, main place to be, where they see their family for the holidays. So technically, during the actual story, Christmas Eve night, Scrooge was likely, in my mind, alone in this house, not because he lived alone, but because the owner and anybody else that might have lived in the house was with their family, and their apartment probably wasn't, even if it was their main residence, they had other places to be on Christmas. So that's why the house was empty. Nobody but Scrooge was there because, he did have family to see. He just didn't want to see them because he's Scrooge. So that was kind of my mindset when I was furnishing this place, that the other apartment, the smaller apartment, is not the main residence of the owner of the house. They just stay there when they're in London So that's why the owner gets the smaller apartment, because they don't stay there that often, and Scrooge does. So they just said, we'll just let Scrooge had the bigger place. Well, originally Marley. I'm not sure how that happened. Marley might have asked for the bigger apartment, and the owner still probably didn't stay there all the time. So sure, they can have the bigger apartment, because I'm at the manor for half the month, you know. So that's why the owner gets the smaller place. But I did decorate it simply. I mean, it looks more expensive than I wanted it to, but again, that is just simply the limitations of The Sims 4. You know, it does look a little bit, but then again, I didn't want it to look like a poor house either, because I mean, he is rich. He probably didn't want to live in a place that looked like a poor house, but he didn't want to spend an extravagant amount of money on his place to live either. He didn't even buy a full house. He's renting a room in somebody else's house. But Scrooge gets a bathroom, a sitting living room, and a bedroom. He gets a sitting room because if you watch the story, there is a place where the spirit of Christmas present sets up their feast. So I'm thinking that little room with the table and the couch will be a part of Scrooge's apartment, and that's where the spirit of Christmas present will set up. I didn't decorate the place for Christmas because, again, it's Scrooge, the owner of the house, and any other tenants that might be there are not home. They're not at this house. They're with their families. They're at their parents' house, their older brother's house. You know, somebody in their family is hosting a Christmas party at the big country manor or a nicer house somewhere in London. And they're there, not at this apartment. Again, I'm imagining this house in specific is made for and intended for a secondary residence for when you're doing business in London. Not a primary residence. Scrooge uses it as a primary residence. Again, that's kind of the point of his story. He was not, if you like an anime called A Certain Magical Index, what I'm about to say is going to make you laugh, but Scrooge was not living his life correctly, pretty much, and he's living pretty cheaply in a apartment that wasn't even originally his. He just grabbed it when his friend died. So yeah, I wanted the place to look pretty simple. You know, it's not the main home of the family that owns it. They're just renting it out. Maybe it was the main house of the family that owns it at one point. But, yeah. If you don't know, A Christmas Carol is a story about a really, mean old, well, he is mean. He's not a pleasant person to be around, but, a mean old, businessman that hates Christmas and is not really spreading the holiday cheer or being as good a person as he can be. And if you will look back at the history of what 1840s London was like, it kind of makes sense why Scrooge was that way. I mentioned poorhouses. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I have looked into the history of poorhouses in London and England in general at the time, and it's not pretty. Being poor is never pretty, but it was especially not pretty back then, and I'm assuming that the author himself realized this and wrote this story as a way to say, hey, let's do better, shall we? One thing about Scrooge that I do want to say is a personal theory of mine. You can disagree with it if you like, but personally, I think that the three ghosts in the story, I think it was all just a normal dream Scrooge was having, and he was already thinking deep down in his brain that, hey, I should probably stop being such a jerk and be a little bit nicer because I'm getting old. This life that I'm living is kind of lonely, and I didn't really intend for it to work out this way, so maybe I can try to change my ways. That's just my opinion. I think Scrooge changed himself, or rather he finally admitted to himself that he wanted to change, be better. That's just my personal opinion. You can disagree with it if you like. You could choose to believe that there was some sort of supernatural intervention. I just kind of think that he was already realizing that he's getting old, he's not going to be around forever, his money's not coming with him when he dies. His nephew is still not giving up on him and trying to make an effort to connect with him. So in the back of his mind, he was probably always thinking, hey, yeah, I should not be a jerk. That's just my personal opinion. Like I said, you're free to disagree with it. Also, this is kind of sad, but this is, well, it's bittersweet. It's sad and it's happy. At the end of the story, Scrooge does change. He helps Tiny Tim, his clerk's disabled son. I think this is going to be really sad, but I think they both still died about a year later, except that their deaths a year later was a lot more, I don't want to use the word happy, but a lot nicer circumstances. Like, instead of dying alone and nobody caring about Scrooge, and some people even probably being happy that he's dead, he was known as somebody who changed things around and started being a lot kinder. And Tiny Tim, instead of passing away in a cold house with not enough food, he passed away happy, maybe even got to walk normally for a little bit before his illness got worse. So that when he did pass away, he passed away a lot happier and under a lot kinder, more pleasant circumstances. Again, you don't have to agree with that personal theory, but that's kind of what I think. That they both still passed away about a year later, like the ghost of Christmas Future said they would, but they did so under more pleasant, more agreeable circumstances because Scrooge decided to change. That's just my opinion. It is sad, but it's still got a little bit of happiness there. It wasn't all bad. And Scrooge did actually change things around. He just didn't fully prevent what the ghost of Christmas future showed him. He just made it a little more bearable. And switching gears to real life, if you can make a bad situation a little more bearable, that's always a good. Sometimes you can't stop bad things from happening, but you can make the situation a little more bearable. And sometimes it doesn't even require much effort to do so. Sometimes it's just changing your mindset, which is exactly what Scrooge did in the story. And you should do this every day of the year, not just Christmas, but Christmas is a good holiday and a good time to reset your mind. I mean, even if it's already in a good place, it doesn't really hurt to take a deep breath, look around you, and appreciate what you've got. And that will be my little Christmas spiel for the day. So once again, my name is Jace. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a very, very Merry Christmas. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everyone.